I'll talk about question number 1 that we provided some guidance for in the report, which is what disciplinary actions do students receive and for what offenses? And now, this is a critical question in trying to understand what's going on in the district. Even apart from disproportionality, you want to know what punishments being used, what disciplinary actions are being used in the district, and for what types of student offenses are students receiving these different actions, even apart from the question of what student populations they belong to. So this, our report kind of provides some guidance for that analysis. And interesting thing is that you can do an awful lot of these analyses with very simple, what we call cross-tabulations. Very easy to do in any statistical software package. And the nice thing is that Trevor and the team have put together the syntax for SPSS is Appendix D, I believe, or Appendix E in the report, is all the syntax that you would need to run this in SPSS, and it's pretty straightforward to say also to sort of use it in other, similar syntax in other software programs. So it's a nice part of the guide. So there's a lot of different ways to go. We're not saying these are the only ways that you can analyze these data, but our goal is to provide somewhat of a blueprint and an organized, systematic way for thinking about this issue. So one question is that we might want to know how many students are receiving any disciplinary action at all. Now remember, and this is all on each of the table slides, is that these are fictitious data. So the data really don't have any meaning in of themselves. So I wouldn't try to interpret them because they're just fictitious for the point of illustrating the analysis. Now a key thing that Trevor mentioned earlier on that can't be emphasized enough, and something I have to remind myself when I'm doing analyses, I don't do them as much as I used to, but is to really carefully define what we mean by certain what we call variables or factors like disciplinary action. What do we actually mean? What is actually incorporated into that when we say disciplinary action? What are all the actions that make up this very broad category? And so it's important to be explicit and transparent about how you're defining things, and then to be consistent using that same definition across different analyses so that the numbers are comparable. So this analysis here tells you very quickly how many students received at least one disciplinary action during the past academic year. And interesting enough, we don't talk about this in the report, but it establishes something of a district average. So if you were to analyze by each school in the district, you could see, well, who's using punishment more than, what schools are using punishment more than other schools, and then it can lead to some further investigation. Okay. So then maybe we want to drill down a little bit deeper, and so our report then asks, the preceding slide asked how many students were disciplined, but the type of discipline that we're most concerned about when we look at that data, the research that we showed early in the introduction, is the research on exclusionary punishments like out-of-school suspension, expulsion, and those kinds of things. And those are the types of punishments that the Department of Education and Department of Justice issued their guidance about. So they're asking districts to look at exclusionary punishment. This analysis looks at all students who were disciplined. How many of all the students who were disciplined, how many received an exclusionary disciplinary action? And again, we need to define what we mean by that and stick to that definition. So this table, the next table here, presents the results of analysis that drills down even more for more detail on exclusionary discipline. It breaks up exclusionary and inclusionary discipline, and then it begins to look at how many days, or at least breaks up a little bit, the number of days that a student was suspended if they received an out-of-school suspension. Because one of the emerging research trends right now is not just whether a student has been suspended or not, but how many days of instructional time have they lost. And so we get into the number of days a student has been suspended. And so this this table presents the results of analysis that would help you get a little bit more refined. And of course, you could add, instead of 1 day and more than 1 day, it could be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 or more days. It could be broken up a little bit differently. But it would help us to get a little bit more at the loss of instructional time, which is becoming a key factor in research. Now, the final table in this section drills down even further. It's one thing to say students were suspended, but what were they suspended for? Again, a reminder that these are fictitious data. They may not match the reality in your districts or what you're familiar with, but they're just meant to illustrate the analysis. But it lays the groundwork later if you want to look at disciplinary actions for a specific offense for a specific student subgroup population. So you want to see, are, say, black students and white students being punished differently for the same offense? It's a very important analysis. This lays the groundwork for that. And so I should note also in the preceding tables, what we had used was sort of the percentage of the total as the metric, as sort of the outcome in the table. This changes, the metric here has changed. Instead of percentage of the total students enrolled, or those who are disciplined, it's a rate per 100 students. It's just a way of building another comparable metric to be able to compare these different offense groups.